Timeism and corporate reform. Contrived shortages to raise prices for greater corporate greed can be seen in the above comparison. The top is before the shortage, 1 bushel of corn and 1 bushel of money. The bottom has only half a bushel of corn for 1 bushel of money. This is shortage inflation, that is, sinflation, higher prices due to the sinful act of contrived shortages. Contrived shortages come from CEOs when they increase their dollar productivity while reducing productivity per capita. What is the impact on prices and unemployment if a CEO buys a company and closes down units that have less than 5% to 7% profits? Contrived shortage is what the great CEO guru at GE did repeatedly, Jack Welch. While known as the GE way, it should be known as Jack's sinflation, not to be confused with sins of infatuation. Jack's inflation at GE. Workers who were profitably engaged in producing needed goods and services were thrown into the ranks of unemployment, with higher prices in those goods no longer produced. Why? Jack's inflation yields higher dollar productivity per CEO. Who paid the cost of higher unemployment and prices from Jack's inflation? The average American. Productivity per capita in America went down. Contrived shortages. Sinflation with higher prices. For instance, banks churn bad checks so as to get repeat overdraft fees. This practice creates a customer attitude that an insurance policy is needed, a policy that a bank will provide with an interesting marketing campaign. Can you sell your house without paying off the mortgage and liens? You can if you buy habitual politicians who only care about re-election contributions. Alcoa would not have bought Reynolds if it had to pay all of Reynolds' obligations. The marketplace would be clearer and cleaner with more jobs, benefits, and cheaper aluminum if it were not for Jack's inflation and Paul's retroactive decapitalism. It's called retroactive because instead of people being cheated out of benefits they thought they were earning like employees at Enron, Reynolds retirees were cheated out of benefits they not only thought they had already earned, but had been receiving. The executives and directors of Reynolds made a lot of money when they approved the sale of Reynolds based on walking away from benefit obligations to Reynolds retirees. The merger and acquisition of corporations on the cheap by walking away from worker obligations takes many forms. Consider the purchase of Dresser Industries by Halliburton, that is, Cheney buying the vice presidency by getting the Bush family out of a financial disaster. Dresser had class action asbestos lawsuits, which Cheney bundled into an insurance subsidiary that was spun off without assets. Bingo! Off-budget accounting like Enron, with the subsidiary having the debts but not the assets. How did the Bush family make a killing? George Tucker Bush's grandfather, Prescott Left, was the longest-serving director at Dresser, who hired Neil Mallon as Dresser CEO. Dresser got his daddy, Poppy Bush, number 41, middle, started in the oil business. Poppy's third son, Neil Wright, brother of President George Tucker Bush, is named after the Dresser CEO, Neil Mallon. The Bush family made a bundle by Halliburton buying the Dresser millstone. Average workers and Americans got screwed, for not only did the asbestos victims lose, but taxpayers must pick up the dollar costs that the Bush family extracted. Cheney got the vice presidency for saving the Bush family a bundle. Contrived shortages, sinflation, can be viewed as a form of shortchanging people. Wait out shorts people of goods. Retroactive decapitalism shortchanges retirees. Cheney shortchanged asbestos victims. As a business lifestyle, shortchanging people is a good descriptive phrase for the person who became president in 2000. Altogether, George Tucker Bush shortchanged investors and taxpayers of $381 million. As an independent CEO, he never had a profitable business. Lucky for General Motors, he never became its CEO, for GM could not survive a CEO like Bush. Banking needs reform of past and present actions that help a few upward but hold down more and more Americans. In practices reminiscent of segregation, banking is developing a peculiar institution called segmentation. With segmentation, those on the top get special hospitality paid for by fees on the bottom rails that hold lower ones down. Banking is paid for by those banking customers who have to have banking but don't have the country club membership to get special treatment. For instance, banks will churn a bad check so as to get repeat overdraft fees. For the rich, they rarely have overdrafts. For the poor, banks readily have the door. For the middle class, banks ramp a marketing campaign with the usual addictive plug, free. The most expensive things in life are first free. Free lunches, free parking, and free love. Free checking is no different, for one cannot get something for nothing. Who pays? Or when does one pay? When the U.S. Congress legislated banking deregulation with multi-state banking, the metastasis was set in motion of a national bank outside of regulatory review. This metastasis will be a cancer that bleeds more and more Americans from the bottom up. Part of corporate reform is banking reform of the despotic private national banks into a national bank in which all pay their fair share of the wealth that banks protect and manage. One broad area of corporate corruption is churning. As a corporate policy, churning derived its name from the activity of butter churning. You keep turning something over and over. For corporate churners, the gold is not butter. Churning stock accounts. The most common application of churning in business is the churning of stocks. This is where a stockbroker keeps buying and selling stocks for a customer with no money being made, but the broker gets a commission each time. Clearly, the symbols of the broker's worth are divorced from the substance of his activity when he turns an account into the red by beating it to debt. Churning employees. With the development of computerized hiring and training, a company can quickly determine which applicant can be hired for a few dollars as compared to keeping an employee whose benefits cost many more dollars. This is just-in-time hiring or inventory of employees. A corporation that churns employees will automatically discharge 10% of its employees so that in 10 years it has no pension obligations. In terms of inventory, this is FIFO, not LIFO. By discharging across all demographic groups, race, age, sex, and performance, the CEOs have protected themselves from litigation. An example is Capital One credit card processing. Churning employees is bringing in-house what had been an outside temp service. Like churning customers in the insurance industry, if a number of corporations in a certain industry churn employees, then there is always a pool of trained applicants. Under the flag of helping America, corporate thieves steal a lot from Americans by besmirking or muddying the meaning of being an American. corporations foster brain drain from abroad to undercut American workers who have invested time and money into getting an education. Equally as malignant as the brain drain is the brawn drain, in which habitual politicians have responded to corporate demands by exporting American jobs. There are two ways to make American corporations competitive on an international scale. Number one, cut executive compensation so as to lower the prices of American goods and services on the world market. Number two, cut employment of American workers by the brawn drain of jobs to cheaper foreign workers. Shrinking factories come from business leaders losing America's brawn. Like exporting jobs, corporations use offshore shenanigans to export tax obligations. American corporations think nothing of calling in the Marines when something goes wrong, yet they don't want to pay the cost of maintaining a prepared and ready Marine, Army, Navy, or Air Force. To get cheap goods and services from abroad, corporations have repeatedly used their political connections to get military muscle to achieve their corporate goals at no cost to corporations, just the American taxpayer. The banana wars at the beginning of the last century are replaced by the oil wars at the beginning of this century. Why buy a banana or a barrel if you can get someone to extort it without cost to you? While some view global imperialism as a plus, it really is an exportation of anti-Americanism that ends up costing more money than the corporations made with the initial extortion. Corporations are suffering a body rot that is killing them as well as the economic systems of which they are an integral part. Corporate reform needs to respond to the needs of shareholders, employees, and customers. Toward this goal, corporate boards of directors should be composed in equal parts of all three. Toward this goal, Timeism has provided brain bees for electing these earthly trinities to resurrect the body of business. American corporations need fresh blood and fresh ideas. We need to get away from corporate boards that look like escapees from Egyptian crypts. Instead of the widespread dirty pay in the corporate world, humanity and America needs a universal compensation system in which people are paid what they are worth as problem solvers, individuals, or team members. This is the capitalism per capita that was described at the beginning. To implement capitalism per capita, Timeism.com developed Touchtone Manager to define, refine, and create the universal and absolute currency that transcends the boundaries of nations and centuries, the life hour. With better democracy and capitalism in the operation of American corporations, we can live in a world of partners going forward together rather than a cancerous world where we live well for a short, brief while. America's premier exports should be better democracy and capitalism. Then the world will not mind that we hold the primary position of shaping the world.
Corporate myops is a good term to describe the short-term, greedy minds of the corporate world. They will not see nor outrun the tsunami of hate that they have cancerized. This writer is not advocating, but merely summarizing and concluding, in tynistic analogies and terms, what others are feeling in their own lives. Sad, really sad. Corporate myopia is one reason why what needs to be done will not be done to fulfill the primary moral imperative of saving life on Earth from global dying. Genocidal? No, geocidal.